going to begin now with rounds of questions, starting with the Conservatives for 6 minutes. Mr. Perkins, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses. Mr. Tada, how many contracts were signed with the government? There was the one for $200 million initially for both the development of the vaccine and some plant improvements. What other contracts were signed?
Yes, we have two contracts, APA, Advanced Purchase Agreement with PSPC. Second, CIF agreement with ICED. Those are the two contracts we have with the federal government of Canada.
So on the first one, which was CIF, the CIF program from ICED, that required, that was for $200 million, and I believe I've read reports that in the end only $173 million was used. Is that correct? Or was the full $200 million used?
That contract contributes up to $200 million to Medicago to support our development of the COVID-19 vaccine and the establishment of a manufacturing facility.
How much was used of that? All of it? Did you receive all $200 million?
I don't comment in the detail yet, but the agreement is up to $200 million.
You won't tell this committee, the Parliament, how much money the Government of Canada actually in the end transferred to you?
Yeah, it is. I have a confidentiality obligation, sir.
Well, it's been reported as $173 million, but since you won't, I'll leave it at $200 million. So in addition to that, you had the purchase agreement for, I think it was 76 million doses of the vaccine, which is estimated to be, if it had been delivered, about $1.5 billion.
That is another agreement of APA with PSPC, which says 20 million doses ordered, and government has an option to order additionally 56 million.
So for 76 million, and again, you'll probably say it's confidential, but the price that is commonly out there is $20 a dose, so 1.5 million. So the recent announcement by the government to pay Medicago $150 million for, I believe, no doses delivered is out of that contract, correct? Their obligation, the government's obligation from that contract?
First, $150 million is non-refundable advance payment, which actually used to manufacture vaccines at risk. This was an original concept.
But you didn't deliver a single vial of vaccines to the government of Canada, is that correct?
It is correct. We didn't deliver anything, any of the doses.
The contract was signed, the first one for the CIF contract in October 2020. 5 days later, the advanced purchase and sale was done for 76 million doses on a vaccine which you hadn't yet invented. And the government, which I know is not your area, had already, through a series of about 3 months, had signed other contracts for 190 million doses of other vaccines, of which they only used half. So when you got approval, and congratulations on getting this great scientific breakthrough of a non-mRNA vaccine with such efficacy, when that was approved by Health Canada in February, I believe it was 2022, was the government not in an obligation to now start purchasing those that production?
As you understand correctly, we obtained approval of the COVID-19 vaccine in February 2022. The APA with PSPC initially said our delivery of the 20 million doses is up to the end of 2021. Because of the delay in the approval, we negotiated in good faith with the PSPC, and we agreed to amend the agreement in which delivery of the first 20 million doses can be made by the end of 2022, which is 10 months after the approval.
Right, and so why didn't any of those doses flow to the government of Canada after it was approved?
This way, after the approval, we faced the challenges in transitioning to a commercial scale-up productions. We started to work on it, and our experts believed we would be able to fix it, but we knew it would take time.
The health minister here at committee last week said the reason was primarily because they had enough doses of other vaccines.
Yeah, because I haven't finished it.
Let me finish. Said that they had enough doses of other vaccines from other manufacturers, and they didn't need this vaccine anymore, and that they actually had another non-mRNA vaccine that they had bought
Yes.
and acquired. Is that correct?
Yes, I will answer that one. While we work our internal challenges, we started to observe market evolving a lot because we started to see a lot of new variants arising that made our vaccine irrelevant because market demand shifted to bivalent vaccine, including Omicron, which is not the case for our vaccine.
So the
At that
delay
time,
by Health Canada made
Yep.
made your vaccine no longer relevant to the subsequent strains of COVID.
therefore, we understand the Canadian government needed to...
Just hang on, I'm speaking.
Go ahead.
And so, the result of that is $150 million of taxpayer money had to flow to you and to Medicago for actually a vaccine that was now outdated. And that's why they didn't receive any vials?
At that time, Canadian government needed to readjust their vaccine inventory positions in light of the government evolving, right? So they decided not to take a vaccine given the market situation they faced then. $150 million advance payment was non-refundable because it was funded to our manufacturing of the vaccine at risk, sir. We purchased raw materials. We produced many batches. We hired additional workforce to support increased capacities
I get that,
before
but
the approval
you didn't
was
deliver a
approved.
single
That's
vial
all
to
the
the government.
time for this round.
Therefore, again, I want to confirm that $150 million advance payment was to finance our manufacturing at risk before the approval was given.
Thank you, Mr. Tada.
Yep.
Next, we're going to go to Ms. Sidhu, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Tada and Ms. Marquise being with us. My first question is, Mr. Tada, critics of our deal may be concerned that this deal was lost money, but that is not true. We saw the development of a vaccine from scratch. We saw growth of a sector and development of a talent pipeline. Can you speak a little bit about what the values of the investment in Medicago was and the importance of the government participating in de-risking these kind of investments?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Thanks to the support and contribution from the government, we advanced technology and science that was born in Canada a lot that resulted in our approval of the COVID-19 vaccine. This is the world's first plant-based VLP vaccine for human use. Together with our shareholders' investment, government contribution was also helpful to provide and advance these technological and scientific achievement. So we don't call it's a waste, but we advanced and we showed significant science advancement for Canada. Given that, given the situation we faced with, we discussed with an ISED and we agreed by mutual consent to terminate the agreement. We settled the agreement by repaying back $40 million in cash and transfer of our key R&D assets, including pilot plant, IP, and assets and equipment to 8 Canadian companies. So our IP will remain in Canada, in the sense.
Thank you. And Medicago recently reached an agreement with the Armies Biotechnology, a Canadian company based in Quebec City, to transfer key Medicago research and development assets, intellectual property, and equipment. Could you let us know exactly what medical research was transferred to this Canadian company? And you already told that the medical employers are working with the Aramis, right?
I have a confidentiality obligation not to disclose the detail of the transaction with Aramis, but I can confirm that we transferred our R&D manufacturing pilot plant in Quebec City, equipment, and our IPs at the request of ISED.
Thank you. And we all know Medical had a really promising research on a unique COVID-19 vaccine. These were plant-based vaccine that didn't contain eggs. Can you expand on why plant-based vaccine technology is important, how this kind of technology could be used for future vaccine development?
Thank you very much. We could not successfully launched COVID-19 vaccine under the very unprecedented pandemic situation, but we still believe the scientific potential of these plant-based vaccines. For example, COVID-19 vaccine, dominant COVID-19 vaccine are messenger RNA vaccines, but having an alternative such as protein-based vaccine, including our plant-based VLP vaccine, would benefit for the people's health because it offers another alternatives. So we still believe in our technologies. Unfortunately, we are winding up operations because of the business decisions, but because we do have scientific achievement and we do have our people or employees who made it happen, so hopefully these technologies can remain in Canada for the future. Further scientific expansion.
Mr. Tada, back to the agreement question again. This agreement enables Canada to maintain an important domestic assets in the Canadian life sciences sector, diversifying the national pipeline of vaccine technologies, and providing Canadians with a safe and effective platform that can complement existing and future vaccine production capabilities. This is why we worked closely with the MCG to ensure that Medicago's science, intellectual property, and core assets remain in Canada, and that it is competencies and capabilities are retained in our country. Could you speak to importance of retaining intangible assets like IP in Canada?
Yes, thank you very much. Our shareholder, Mitsubishi Chemical, had to make a difficult business decision. This is the business decision they've got to make. But they wanted to be as collaborative as possible with the Canadian government so that we can have kind of win-win solutions. As a result of that, we agreed with ICED to terminate the agreement, but we settled by transferring our key assets we had around the pilot plant, equipment, and IP to a Canadian company at the request of ICED. So this is I believe this fulfills Canadian government requirements, and we also wanted to make this business decision executed as smooth as possible.
And one last question on the plant-based production technology. Are there any other ways this technology can be used to fight other diseases? Was your team working on any other drugs or vaccines?
Medicago is winding up now, so we are not working on that around at this point in time. But hopefully, if Aramis continues to advance technologies leveraging our Medicago achievement, hopefully they can find some new solutions, so new potential, new applications of the VLP, plant-based VLP technologies.
Thank you, Mr. Tada. Ms. Sidhu, suite Madame Vignola pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Ms. Vignola, 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Medicago had a plant in North Carolina. Is the technology used there, was it transferred as well to Aramis technology in Quebec City?
Thank you for the question. The factory we have in North Carolina is actually leased assets, so it's not a part of a transaction with Aramis.
OK. Merci.
Thank you. Medicago specialized at the outset in H1N1 vaccines for influenza and even the Ebola virus. Had Medicago focused only on those viruses during the pandemic, would we be in the situation we're in now, being a factory that's empty in the city of Quebec and that's worth a couple of $1 million and a company that was wound down?
Yes, previously we worked on those viruses before. Now, because of the business decision by our shareholders, we are winding up and we transferred some key assets to Aramis. So hopefully, I'm not in a position to make a comment on Aramis business plan strategies, but they might or may not take those projects as their strategies.
Ma question était hypothétique.
My question was hypothetical. If Medicago hadn't stepped forward to help the government of Canada with all the risks that involved, and had continued rather to focus on the vaccinations that it had already developed, would we be in the position we're in now?
It's very difficult to answer the hypothetical questions, so I'm going to refrain from commenting on that. Sorry for that.
Merci.
Thank you.
Est-ce que Mitsubishi...
Why did Mitsubishi Tanabe Pharma Corporation take an interest in Medicago at the outset?
Mitsubishi Tanabe Pharma Corporation acquired 60% Medicago in 2013, so 10 years ago. Vaccine business is one of their core focus areas, so they wanted to strengthen their business capabilities, incorporating Medicago's technology, which is plant-based VLP vaccines.
OK. Est-ce que Mitsubishi Chemical...
Very well. Was Mitsubishi Chemical Group concerned about the presence of Philip Morris as a shareholder?
Philip Morris was shareholder of Medicago even before Mitsubishi Tanabe Pharma acquired 60%. So based on the discussion between Philip Morris Investment and Mitsubishi Tanabe Pharma, they agreed to form a joint venture at 60-40 shareholding ratio.
Donc, aucune préoccupation.
So no concern about that at all?
I don't know whether they had a concern 10 years ago or not.
Est-ce que Medicago a tenté de se...
How did Medicago attempt to distance itself from Philip Morris in 2020, and why did it wait until 2022 to do that?
First, a shareholding structure was a topic discussed between two shareholders. Medicago itself was not involved in the shareholders' discussion, so I'm not in a position to make a comment on that aspect.
Vous avez dit dans votre déclaration que...
You stated in your opening statement that the vaccination worked 70%, was effective for asymptomatic COVID, and 100% to prevent severe COVID. So I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the only reason why the World Health Organization did not authorize the vaccination for emergency use was because of its shareholder.
That's our understanding. It has nothing to do with the vaccine's efficacy or quality.
La technologie par les plantes...
Plant-based vaccine technology. Some media has said that the tobacco plant was used to produce the vaccination. Could you, and of course I'm not a scientist, I'm not speaking to a scientist, but I imagine that you have some basic ideas about the production methods, the difference between the plant used by Medicago and the plants used by cigarette producers. So what's the difference between Nicotiana benthamia and Nicotiana tobacco?
First, I want to clarify that we use plant called Nicotiana benzamiana. This is a relative to tobacco leaf, but it's quite different from the tobacco you smoke. And our vaccine contains no tobacco or nicotine product.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Tada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tada and Ms. Marquis. I think that winds up my time. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Please, for 6 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get some answers out of this as well, on a similar track. On December 29th, 2022, CBC News reported that the tobacco giant Philip Morris International had divested all its shares from Medicago. Now, in a statement, Philip Morris spokesperson David Fraser said the company decided that this was, quote, the most appropriate way forward. So before the decision, Philip Morris owned 21% of your company's shares. Can you confirm how Philip Morris International was compensated for its Medicago shares?
Thank you for the question. I understand the result was that share transfer from Philip Morris Investment to Mitsubishi Tanabe Pharma was a result of the discussion, intensive discussion between the two shareholders. And Medicago was not involved in those discussions, so we don't have any knowledge to answer your question.
So you have no idea how Philip Morris International was compensated?
No, we don't know. It was between the shareholders.
Okay. Mitsubishi Chemical Group's consolidated financial results for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2023 notes the following, quote, that MCG has determined that it will not pursue the commercialization of the VLP vaccine. In addition, MCG judged that it was not viable to continue to make further investment in the commercialization of Medicago's development products and decided to cease all of its operations at Medicago and proceed with an orderly windup of its business and operations. Consequently, since the investment has become unrecoverable, the carrying amount of Medicago's vaccine manufacturing equipment and goodwill related to its business and operations was reduced to the recoverable amount, end quote. So can you outline why MCG came to the determination that it was not viable to continue to make further investment in the commercialization of Medicago's development products?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Two axes. First, after the approval, we faced internal challenges in scale-up production commercial, and we knew that it would take time to fix the issue. That's first. Second, while we are fixing the issue, we started to observe COVID-19 vaccine market is evolving quite a lot, and market demand shifting to bivalent vaccine, including Omicron strain, which our vaccine did not contain Omicron strain. So we thought additional R&D investment would be needed to catch up. At the same time, we negotiated with the PSPC that because of the market's change, PSPC would cancel their order because of their inventory position and the virus is strain in circulation. Given those, we understand Mitsubishi Chemical reviewed these situations comprehensively and decide further investment will not make a business case for them.
Okay, can you confirm the recoverable amount for Medicago's vaccine manufacturing equipment and goodwill related to its business?
I'm not in a position to comment financial recoverable amount, but we can understand that our shareholders have invested in Medicago almost $2 billion so far.
Okay. Philip Morris International's 2022 annual report noted the following, quote, in 2021, our equity method investee Medicago Inc. initiated additional rounds of equity funding in which we did not participate. And as a result, our share of holdings in Medicago Inc. was reduced from approximately 32% at December 31st, 2020 to approximately 23% as of December 31st, 2021. The ownership dilution resulted in a 4-cent per share favorable impact to diluted EPS and an income of $55 million to equity investments and securities, income loss net in the consolidated statements of earnings for the year ended December 31st, 2021, end quote. At this committee's meeting last Wednesday, Health Minister Mark Holland claimed that PMI's minority position that was held in Medicago did not advance the interests of either nicotine or tobacco. Given that this ownership dilution had a positive financial impact for Philip Morris International, contributing to a net income of $55 million for the year 2021. Is it accurate to claim that Philip Morris International's minority position in Medicago did not advance the tobacco company's interest?
First, I can't comment on how interesting Medicago is to Philip Morris investment. That's the investment decisions. But I can confirm that they are minority investors, and we didn't have any tobacco research, whatever, with Philip Morris investment. We use Nicotiana benzamiana as a plant, which is relative to tobacco leaf, but it's not tobacco leaves. And our relationship with PMI is nothing more than minority shareholder.
Okay. The profit could certainly float back to the company so that they could advance their interests. The government invested $173 million in Medicago in 2020 to help your company develop and produce its plant-based COVID-19 vaccine, Covifense. Can you confirm if the government of Canada received any equity in exchange for its investment in Medicago?
That $173 million is a contribution under CIF agreement, and there was, so that's all about it. So we can't.
So you can't tell us whether there's an equity?
We don't discuss the detail about the contract, but I am just telling that $173 million in the contracted in 2020 was the contribution by the ICED to help Medicago's development of the COVID-19 vaccine and establishment of the large-scale manufacturing facility.
I think it's really hard for this committee to get a lens without
Tada.
that answer.
Suite, Monsieur Deltel, pour 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Dettel, 5 minutes. Good day, Ms. Marquis, Mr. Tada. Welcome to our House of Commons. I am an MP for Quebec City. I was very proud of Medicago, and I think it's very unfortunate what happened over the past few years, especially given that the World Health Organization refused to recognize the vaccine that you worked on. So isn't that disappointing? It was written black on white in international treaties that the World Health Organization would never recognize the work of Medicago. Let's remember that the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control of the World Health Organization specifies that parties will ensure that their policies will not be influenced in any way by the tobacco industry. And, of course, Canada was one of the 151 signatories. In 2008, Philip Morris became a minority shareholder of Medicago. At that point in time, did anyone, either within the government or in 2008 in the company, ring a bell to say, look, this is an emergency, be careful, the World Health Organization will never recognize our work? Yes or no?
Questions. No, we have been in a conversation with WHO because we want to prepare ourselves to make an application under the pandemic situations. After we make an application, they rejected because of the tobacco connection reason. But the situation is this way. When they review the application, they already have other vaccine candidates. Therefore, we understand they made their own decision based on the situation they faced with at that point in time.
Tada, c'est écrit noir sur blanc.
Mr. Tada, black and white, we know that the World Health Organization would never recognize work carried out by any company with a shareholder that was a tobacco company, and that was in 2008. So in 2020, you announced your work on the vaccine. So in October 2020, the Government of Canada provided you with taxpayer money, $173 million of it. Did anyone in your company point out to the government that given that you had a tobacco minority shareholder, the World Health Organization would never recognize your scientific work, yes or no?
We did not specify that the WHO may or may not approve our vaccine because of the reason the Canadian government. First, the fact that PMI was our minority shareholder was already public information. Second, WHO has a kind of exceptional treatment under the pandemic situations. So we discussed with the WHO to prepare for our applications. But when they reviewed, the situation got changed.
So what did they say at that time when you had that kind of discussion with the government?
To the Canadian government?
The W, sorry.
We just described our clinical data of the vaccine, and we got their suggestions so that we can prepare for the applications.
Mais à cet moment-là, est-ce qu'il y a des gens...
But at that point in time, was there anyone within the Government of Canada who told you, look, let's be careful, there's a tobacco producer here and that will never be recognized by the World Health Organization. You won't be recognized. Did the government alert you to this?
My personal knowledge, I don't have the answer to the question.
Est-ce que... Excusez-moi, vous dites que vous ne pouvez pas, vous ne voulez pas répondre.
I'm sorry, you're telling us that you can't answer, you don't wish to answer?
I don't know the answer to the question, whether there was anybody from the Canadian government or whether we specify that. To the
Maître Marquis, avez-vous quelque chose à préciser là-dessus?
And Ms. Marquis, do you have anything to add? Was there anyone within your company who pointed out this issue to the federal government? This was not discussed within the framework. I think that I will attempt to clarify matters to the committee. The World Health Organization does not have control over the exportation of products outside of Canada. The World Health Organization was promoting and managing vaccines for the gift of vaccines in surplus in certain countries, but the World Health Organization wouldn't recognize it. And when in March 2022 it said that no, it wouldn't accept it for emergency use listing, were you surprised, or did you just realize that you had forgotten to signal that there was going to be a problem? The World Health Organization might have made a different decision. They made the decision they did in view of the other options that were then available to them. So you gambled that the World Health Organization would say, yes, fine, we'll accept it. During our discussion with the World Health Organization, this issue was not brought up by them at the time. That's $173 million public funds spent by the Government of Canada to invest in your company. Could you make public the contracts that were signed? And please understand, Mr. Tada.
Formula de vaccination. We don't want to know that. But when we talk about taxpayer money, we need clarity and we need transparency. Est-ce que vous êtes prêt à déposer les contrats?
So are you ready to provide us with the contracts linking you to the Government of Canada without going into scientific information, of course, but regarding the amount of money that was paid for by Canadian taxpayers in this agreement?
Clarify that we acted in good faith to satisfy all the contracts we made in government. Second, for advance purchase agreement with PSPC, we already agreed that access on unredacted copy of the agreement can be granted to Committee on Public Accounts so that they can review the agreement for the country.
Thank you, Mr. Tada. Have you finished your answer? Okay, thank you. Merci, Monsieur Deltel.
Thank you, Mr. Deltel. And we will now hear Ms. Vignola for 2.5 minutes. I think it's the Liberals, rather. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Perry.
Sorry, Sean.
Dr. Pawlowski for 5 minutes.
A lot has been made of the fact that WHO didn't approve the vaccine, and I think that was a part attributed to the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. But I have some familiarity with the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. I was actually part of one intergovernmental negotiating body meeting when they were forming that treaty. I'm pretty sure the answer to this question, but is there anything specifically in the treaty which would prevent WHO approving a vaccine that was made by a company that was involved in the tobacco industry? Ms. Marquis.
So the treaty does refer to the fact that investments that can further the interests of the tobacco industry could be considered by the WHO.
The pivotal word would be could be?
Could be.
So it certainly doesn't bind WHO.
I wouldn't say binding as the word, but it's something that they can consider in their analysis. Because the treaty does contain exceptions for pandemic purposes, so it contains a certain level of interpretation for the WHO.
Or it contains a certain level of interpretation.
Yes.
So in your opinion, had there been no other vaccines out there available for COVID, do you think WHO would still have not approved its use?
Yes, I think so, because it would have outweighed the benefits would have outweighed their considerations for the tobacco industry.
But am I right that at the time that it actually came before them, there were lots of other vaccines, and so in that context, the fact that it was produced with the tobacco company's input became far more relevant than if there were no other vaccines and this wasn't already being addressed?
Correct.
I did not know that relative of the tobacco was used to produce the vaccine, which I find is very interesting. The fact that Philip Morris invested in this company perhaps could be seen as the fact that there are a lot of tobacco producers around the world, for example, in Zimbabwe, and people with pretty limited income. And so, yes, although we would like to see nobody smoking cigarettes anymore, and I'm looking around the room, I'm not sure if anyone here smokes cigarettes. I know there's some of them. However, potentially finding more useful alternatives to the use of tobacco plants could be seen as being socially desirable in a lot of poor countries where you have tobacco producers who have very limited incomes. Am I right? Or perhaps as a company CEO, this isn't one of the things you consider, but I'm suggesting that there might be some social utility, in fact, in using tobacco plants for other purposes other than smoking cigarettes.
Thank you for the interesting question. We are pharmaceutical companies using plants, but we are not selling a plant itself. So we don't have any expertise or knowledge to expand your potentially very nice idea for that. But I think I will leave other expertise to comment on that.
Any more time?
A little over a minute.
So the new company that's being formed out of the remains of Medicago, Aramis, it's made up of former employees, and what, if any, transfer of your factory and your equipment has gone over to them, and was it sold to them, or what's the relationship between Medicago and the new company?
As you understand correctly, Aramis' leadership consists of our former employees, and it is based in Quebec City. We worked with Aramis for the asset transfer as a part of settlement to terminate our SIF agreement with ICED. So we transferred our R&D manufacturing pilot plant in Quebec, equipment, and intellectual property assets to Aramis at the request of ICED, and that was a part of the settlement to terminate that agreement.
So this was kind of a three-way agreement between the Government of Canada, Aramis, and Medicago to kind of in closing down Medicago?
So we worked the transfer to Aramis at the request of ICED, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Pawlowski. Suite et enfin, Madame Vignola.
And now the last round, Ms. Vignola, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. A little earlier, Mr. Tada, you stated that the technology in the North Carolina factory is not included in the agreements here in Canada. So what happens to that technology? Who does that technology belong to now, and who controls that technology in North Carolina?
In North Carolina are relatively bigger commercial plants. It's not a core of the research and development and IPs. All IPs are basically controlled by our operations in Quebec. Therefore, we transfer our key R&D assets of pilot plant in Quebec, intellectual property assets and equipment to Aramis, but the plants in the North Carolina states which we are using for commercial production is not a part of the transaction.
Very well. So what's happening to those plants?
They are leased plants, so we are negotiating with the landlord to terminate the lease.
Est-ce qu'elles utilisent la même technologie?
Do they use the same technology as the one used in Quebec City?
It is a plant-based VLP vaccine manufacturing facility. So it's the same product, same technology.
Donc, quelqu'un d'autre.
So then someone else could use this technology rather than Aramis using it?
No, really, because this is plant-based VLP. Even though we showed IP, it's not easy. I mean, they need established know-how to produce it. Even if you are given equipment or a building, no one can produce the product we produce based on our IP and technologies. And our IPs, we have protected so far, have been transferred to Aramis, so they own that IP.
Merci.
Merci, Madame Vignola.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Vignola.
Johns, please, for 2.5 minutes.
Who's financing Aramis?
We have no idea.
No. You had stated, that you didn't tell the government about your Philip Morris partnership because it would make your product ineligible at the World Health Organization. Is that true?
No, I don't know. I have no idea whether we did or did not tell PMI's existence to the Canadian government, but what I know is it was a public information that PMI owns minority share of the Medicago.
But it would have been a deal breaker, likely,
Absolutely.
right? It could have been a deal breaker, right? And that's a concern. Like, did you intentionally fail to warn the government about the likely effects of their involvement, your company's involvement with PMI, and do you think that sort of omission is okay, or should disclosures like that be mandatory?
I have no knowledge. I don't know whether we communicated or we didn't communicate.
But do you think it should be?
I don't know. I don't comment.
I think so. So the Government of Canada tabled the Public Accounts of Canada 2023 on October 24th, 2023. The public accounts, which disclosed a loss by the Public Health Agency of Canada of $150 million due to an unfulfilled contract by a vendor. According to the document, none of these funds were expected to be recovered. Despite inquiries from parliamentarians and the media, the government initially refused to provide any details of this loss, stating that this information could not be divulged because of confidentiality agreements with the contractor. Can you confirm if Medicago asked the Government of Canada to withhold information with respect to this $150 million loss from Parliament?
No, we haven't. We understand government and Medicago had confidential obligations, but we discussed we can't disclose the detail without prior consent by the other party. So we discussed with the PSPC to what extent they could or we could disclose. So we have never requested to hold that information. And one more thing, $150 million non-advance payment was paid, and we used it at risk manufacturing. And we could not deliver the doses, but WHO rejection of PMI's existence has nothing to do with those situations.
Thank you, Mr. Tada. And next, Dr. Ellis, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Sharon and Mr. Tada. Good to see you again. We met at the Public Accounts Committee. Sir, at that time on the 23rd of March 2023, when I questioned you, you agreed that Medicago had received $773 million from the Government of Canada, and that you own the IP and the business assets in Canada. Is that true, sir?
Yes, sir. As of 2020, we made a CIF agreement with ICED. Yes.
$773 million, sir.
$173 million was the amount contracted then.
Sorry, sir. At that time, at that committee, you said $773 million. And that number, of course, came from the fact of the number of doses that the Government of Canada agreed to buy. Is that number not correct, sir?
No, it's not correct. I'm not aware of that.
Okay, I would encourage you to go back and read those transcripts, and certainly that is in the transcripts from the 23rd of March 2023. Oddly enough, sir, are we here to believe that Mitsubishi, which of course the parent company is an incredibly successful multinational corporation, that out of the goodness of your heart, you gave up $40 million IP and business assets in Canada?
We discussed, and our shareholders also in the discussion with an ICED intensively, and we agreed after a good faith negotiation that we will repay the amount owed to the Canadian government, which included $40 million cash and our transferable key R&D assets, including intellectual property.
I guess if I owned Mitsubishi, I would say, why did you do that? They already gave you $150 million. Why would you give IP assets and $40 million? Did they have something over your head?
Contribution from the ICED was for COVID-19 vaccine development and establishment of the manufacturing facility. we developed COVID-19 vaccines and get it approved by Health Canada. And we spent your contribution from the government for that developmental work. But in order to settle the agreement, given where we are, we agreed that settlement includes repayment of $40 million and transfer of the assets.
Sorry, sir, through you, Chair, could you be a little bit more transparent about settling the contract? That doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm not able to disclose further details of the settlement.
But if the Government of Canada agreed as an advance purchase agreement to give you $150 million, you, sir, have made it clear that I think that you've held up your part of the bargain. So why would you give them back $40 million assets and IP? That makes no sense.
We have to be very clear that you are talking about $150 million that is an advance payment under APA with PSPC. The other contract is CIF agreement with an ICED. So two agreements are different stuff, sir.
Yeah, I guess that's still going to leave Canadian taxpayers in the dark as to what actually happened. Sir, are there any other people who could testify here who could shed more light on this?
I want to clear that we have two agreements with the Canadian government. We acted in good faith to fulfill both of the agreements where possible. If we cannot, we followed termination clause of the agreement, or we discussed in good faith, and for CIF agreement, we agreed with, as I said, to terminate or settle the agreement by repaying cash and transfer of the assets.
Yeah, I guess, sir, through you, Chair, if I might, it still leaves the Canadian taxpayer confused as to how all this happened. I mean, I'm sitting here, I've been following and participating in this story for the entire time, and I'm confused. And I think that all of our jobs sitting around this table is to come to a better idea of what happened to the Canadian taxpayers' money. And I guess I don't feel like that's forthcoming, and that's a shame. That being said, sir, I hate to do this to the committee, but I do have to table a motion, and that motion, Chair, will say, given that the Liberal government's carbon tax has had a detrimental impact on the health and livelihood of Canadians, driving 2 million of them to use food banks in March of 2023 alone, the Chair report to the House that the committee call on the government to immediately cancel the carbon tax. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tada. We'll take the motion as a notice of motion because it doesn't touch on the matter that we are now considering. So thank you for that.